My name's Kelleher. I work for a company called Umbrella, who build Umbraco sites. I am also the lead developer of uComponents. Has anybody used uComponents? Okay, so there's a lot of people. So yeah, there may be some things that people have seen before, maybe some things that are kind of new to some people. So if at any point, if anyone's got any questions, do feel free to raise your hand, interrupt. Happy to answer any questions. So for today's presentation, I'm going to be talking a bit about the background of the project. I'm going to give an overview of all the data types because I know there's quite a few that people aren't aware of, so just a quick overview. I'm going to be talking about what's new in uComponents, recent changes that have happened when things got moved over into the Umbraco core, which are now part of the default install. Do a couple of demonstrations, and then where you can find documentation and how to download, and then we've got some time at the end to ask any questions. Okay, so what is uComponents? It is a collaborative project for creating components for Umbraco. It is a completely community-driven project, so if anybody wanted to get involved, they could do, just either from a developer perspective or ideas, suggestions, whichever else, we're quite open. So then, what are the uComponents? Well, we've got a variety of functionality in there. We've got a lot of data types, which we'll cover in a moment. We've got a whole bunch of XLT extensions, which when we first made uComponents, XLT was the kind of the main engine for the macros, but now you've got Razor, so you can still use a lot of these XLT extensions in Razor as well. They're just library extensions, really. We have some UI modules for doing drag and drop or having keyboard shortcuts in the back office. And we also have a set of 404 handlers, which are one of the lesser known features. And then there's also some other server controls in there as well for render templates. And then there's one we're working on for get media as well, where you can just drop a server control on if you're doing .NET work, and it would just render the appropriate media item. Okay, so since uComponents was released, it has become the most popular package for Umbraco. There is about 35,000 downloads on our Umbraco. We've got about 10,000 downloads from Codeplex, and we've been doing NuGet for probably about the last 6 months or so, and we've got about 900 odd, which, when you add it all together, there's about 60 downloads of uComponents every day. And I'm guessing a lot of people still reuse the same thing. So it is very widespread for Umbraco, and a lot of people are using it. So because it's so widespread, one of the sort of the successes of uComponents is that certain functionality has become quite mature and also well adopted. So we've now brought some parts into the Umbraco default install, and these were things like the multi-node tree picker, which is by far the most popular data type that we had. We also did one for the multiple text string, which I'll show a demo of shortly. A slider. Then we had some XPath checkbox list and drop-down list. And we also brought in uQuery, which is an underlying sort of engine or full of helper methods, which kind of powers a lot of these other components. Okay, so then for moving other things into the Umbraco core, depending on sort of community feedback we get or how popular we can gauge them to be, we could move other things into the Umbraco core. One that is up for conversation at the moment is one called URL Picker. I don't know, does anyone use URL Picker? Yeah, for a few hands. So it is quite a popular component. Okay, so I'll just quickly go over all the data types that we've got in there at the moment. Oops, not that one. Right. So, is that big enough for everybody? Okay. So I'll just quickly run down, and if there's anything anyone wants me to stop and explain further, we can do. So the first one we have is autocomplete. This is where it can autocomplete from either content nodes that you've got, or members, or media items. So if you just start typing, let's try and zoom in actually. Bigger. Okay. Yeah, so if you start typing any any of the titles, it will just auto-complete them. And then you can add those, and it will just add them underneath. Okay. Next one we've got is a character limit. So as you start typing any words, you can see the character limit. I don't know if that's too low. You see the character limit just increase, decrease, so you can set that to whatever you need it to be. We have a drop-down list for a country picker. So this is just an automatically populated list of all the countries that the .NET is aware of. Technically, it uses the system globalization library just to populate all the country codes. Another one is a drop-down checklist. So you get a drop-down list, but then you can also select items from there. So if I select hello, Umbraco UK Festival, we have that. Another one is elastic text box. So if you start typing and you wanted it to expand and to give you more room, you can start it will auto expand as you go down. So sometimes a content header may feel limited by how much space that they've got and don't like it to scroll, but it does scroll. But it can just expand as big and small as you choose. We have a file picker where you can select a file from a certain folder. So here I've just predefined it as a CSS. So let's just say if you're doing a multilingual site where you'd have a different CSS file for different brands or different languages, then you could select those on your home node or something. You could have those there. But you can customize that to pick any file from anywhere within your website. We have an image drop-down list where you can upload an image and associated text, and just give you a drop-down list of those. An incremental text box where you can just press the up and down keys, and it will just increment it up and down. Some people prefer that to a slider. I don't personally, but you can do. And then multi-node tree picker, which is the big daddy. So you can just select different nodes, and you can also specify it to not select nodes. And that's it's a bit light on there. I can't really see it, but yeah. So the bottom node you can't select because I've specified it to disallow that. And then you can drag and drop the nodes, and you get back a list of node IDs in your Razor or your XLT. Multiple dates, so you can add dates in if you wanted to have date ranges or pick things that were happening on certain dates. It's an extension of the Umbraco one. Oh, the slide's not working. Okay, we've got multiple text strings. So let's say if you have a list of items that you wanted to use, just to have out there, you can just enter something, and then it will just create a new line for each one. And then if you wanted to change the sort order, you could do. For some reason, the dragon's not working. Let me just reload this. There's my one demo fail. Okay. So where was we? Okay, so you can drag and drop these items. I don't know, for some reason it didn't do the drag and drop before. We've got a radio button list with images, which is pretty similar to the drop-down list that we had, but it's radio buttons instead. We've got a slider, so if you gave it a range of things, so you could use this for like product ratings, you could use it for different, for different things in the back office. Toggle box, which is a pretty version of a checkbox. If I just zoom out a little bit there. But you can also specify the text of what gets used, so it can either be an on or off or true or false. It's up to you. We've got URL picker, where you can either pick a URL or a content node or a media node, or upload an item there and then. So if I just pick a content node, let's choose there, that'll just be populated there, and you'll be given some XML or JSON, and you can do what you need with that in Razor or XLT. User picker, that lists all the users that are in your back office. So if you wanted to have a blog, you could specify, who was the author of this. I've only got admin at the moment. And then the last two are the XPath checkbox list and drop-down list, where they're right down at the bottom, where you can give it an XPath, and that will query against all the published nodes. So here I've just said get all the pages, but not this uComponents demo one, so it just lists the other ones. And the same with the drop-down list as well, if you just wanted to select one node. But when you select these multiple ones, it can give you a comma-separated list of node IDs. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of all the data types that we've got, because I know some people aren't familiar with some of the lesser-known ones. Okay. So other things we've been doing recently, in the latest, since we've moved things across to the Umbraco core, we've now cleaned up the code and the project structure from a technical perspective. We've separated all the areas of functionality into their own projects and assemblies, so the data types are their own thing. I mean, for people who are just using it in the back office, this won't make any difference whatsoever. But let's just say as a developer, if you just wanted to get the XLT extensions or the not found handlers, you could just get those assemblies and not worry about the rest of your components. We've also retired quite a few of the legacy components. There were some data types which have been superseded. We had one called related links with media, but that got superseded by the multi URL picker, because you can do exactly the same thing, and it was a nicer UI, and the previous version was a bit unsupported. So we've retired those ones to get rid of the the extra stuff in there. Okay. Another big important thing that we've been working on is to provide ongoing compatibility with Umbraco releases. Now, for anyone who tried to upgrade an Umbraco install from 4.7 to 4.8 and had uComponents, they hit a pretty big nightmare trying to upgrade it. So we've now been able to get a release out of uComponents that is compatible with every version of Umbraco since 4.5. So whichever version of Umbraco you use after 4.5, there is a compatible version of uComponents. And we still support all of those versions so far. Cut off a bit there. Let's come out of that. We've got some new features. We've introduced Razor model binding. So for the more complex data types like the URL picker or even multi-node tree picker, instead of being given just a list of node IDs, with the Razor model binding, we'd be able to give you like a collection of nodes, so you don't have to go get that manually yourself. So you can just work straight with the property, your multi-node tree picker property, and just loop through all the nodes. It just makes working with Razor a little bit more easier. We're trying to support all the data types through that. We've also introduced some custom macro engines, one of which is the XLT macro engine, which kind of it sort of levels the playing field with Razor, because there is some features that you can do with Razor macro engine that you can't do with XLT, like having inline XLT if you wanted to use that. But one of the key features, or the most important feature of this, is the usage of this attribute called the file location. So what this can do is you specify your XSLT file, and then you're removing the need to having a macro definition for your database. So if you were going to do synchronization, all you're doing is copying your templates over and your XSLT file, and you don't need to recreate the macro itself. And any custom properties that you have, you can just add in, and the macro engine will dynamically add those in as well. We've got some new data types coming in the next version, in 5.1. These are SQL autocomplete, SQL dropdown. So this is where you can have a data source from SQL Server. Currently SQL Server at the moment. We're working on MySQL support. So if you've got an external data source and you wanted it in an autocomplete or a drop-down list, you could you can use this now. And then we also have an XPath autocomplete, which supersedes the old autocomplete that we've got. It just makes it much nicer. It's a much nicer UI. So we're currently on 5.0. So when will 5.1 be released? Well, right now. If I can go smaller. Can I go smaller? Yeah, that's better. There we go. Okay. So there we go. I'm going to release right now. I did this last year. It's the recommended release. I said all this up before. Okay. So 5.1 is released now, and that's the package and the NuGet package. Yeah. I uploaded this just before I started this, and it's already had 2 downloads. yeah, these notifications. Okay, so with the new data types that we've got, the SQL autocomplete and the drop-down list, I'd just like to give a small demonstration of that. Oh, too far. Right. Okay, so we have an external data source. Now, I'm going to just use the AdventureWorks database from Microsoft. Just to, if you have any kind of data source that you want to pull into Umbraco and then use that data internally, this is how you could do this. So the AdventureWorks database is sort of product definitions and customer records, and then orders and sales and whatnot. So let's say if you wanted to list on your Umbraco site your product categories, I had some SQL which just listed down here just the value and the text that we wanted to present. So I'm going to put this into a drop-down list. So in the Umbraco back office, I've created my SQL autocomplete earlier, and you get given a field where you can insert some raw SQL, and we've got some helpers as well. There is a couple of parameters. These are too small to see, but there's a couple of parameters here. The one's called @current_ID, and there's another one. That's just for autocomplete. Yeah, there's another one for the autocomplete for @autocomplete, so it can pass into the SQL query whatever you type in. The current ID is actually the page that you're currently on. So if you were going to query something, say in the Umbraco database, and you have the node ID of the page or the media ID of the page you're currently on, you can pass that into your query as well. You can have a selection of query strings. So these are just query strings that are listed in your web config. By default, we just use the Umbraco one, but I'm selecting AdventureWorks. And then there's some other options for finely tuning the autocomplete. So when I add this to my document type, I've already got a drop-down list of all the product categories. So this is pulling straight from SQL Server, and I can select any one of those. And then for the autocomplete as well, if I start typing, it can autocomplete from SQL Server as well. And if I select, say, bikes, some accessories, mountain bikes, and I can do as you would expect, the drag and drop and whatever else there. And when I save it, that will save. Let's go. I'll show you how this looks in the Umbraco config. Am I scaring anyone if I go into the Umbraco config file? This is for anyone who doesn't know what the Umbraco config file is. This is an XML cache of your entire Umbraco website, so you can kind of see what data is in there. This is obviously very geeky for non-technical people. So for these 2 properties that I've just added, we can see that for the category that's selected from the drop-down, it just saves the ID, so you can reference that any way you wanted if it was going to be in a macro or view or user control. And then also for the autocomplete items, it saves that just as XML. We've already added a Razor model binder for the autocomplete, so that will just give you a collection of keeper values. So when you're inside Razor, you can just say, just loop through these items and just go, I want .text, .value. Okay. Another thing that we've been working on recently is our new documentation website. Previously, all our documentation was up on Codeplex wikis, which I don't know. It served its purpose, but now we want to sort of make it a bit more of a rich text experience, I guess. And also, we want to open it up for more collaboration and contribution. So what we've done, we followed lead from the Umbraco project we've hosted up all the documentation up on GitHub, so it's open to anyone to contribute. You just click on the Fork Me on GitHub banner. But this is still hosted on GitHub. It uses GitHub's internal page engine to actually render all the pages out. So uComponents.org is using the GitHub repository directly. So any updates that are made on GitHub are automatically synced into the website. So, and this is the actual website as it is right now. So you can go into, we're still porting it across, but you can go into whatever whatever you want documentation of, and we've got things about the multi-URL picker, how it looks in the back office, how you can configure it in different ways. But we're slowly but surely getting all the documentation across. Okay, so where can you get hold of uComponents? You can download the package from our Umbraco. You can download it from your back office as well through the package repository. If you are working in Visual Studio, you can just NuGet, install package uComponents, it's installed. And if you wanted to delve into the source, if you are more of a hardcore developer, there was a bug that was bugging you, get the source, debug it, send me a patch, and I'll put it out a new release. So, yeah, does anyone have any questions about uComponents? Yes?
If we already use it 5.0, the upgrade path is installed?
Yeah, right, so the question was if you're already using 5.0, and this also applies to previous versions as well, is the upgrade path simple? Yeah, absolutely, you can install directly on top of it. I wouldn't recommend uninstalling because that can have repercussions. So if you have data types installed, the uninstall process may remove those data types, which would then subsequently remove your content. So don't do that. Just install over the top. The worst thing that will happen, which I'm sure is going to be resolved in a future Umbraco version, is that you would have multiple package definitions in your install packages, which is quite an easy cleanup task to do yourself. But yeah, don't uninstall it. Just install over the top of it. And we've tried to ensure backwards compatibility. So you can technically, I've never tried this, but you can technically install version 1 and then install version 5 and it will just work. I've not tried that. Any other questions?
Well, Swiss and some Swiss don't cause any problems, so
I don't know yet. No, it's quite an interesting one. I mean, obviously, uComponents wants to follow the best practices of the Umbraco core. So, because I'm also a core team member as well, I think the transition of any changes that we do is going to be a little bit more smoother. Hopefully, I'll have some insider knowledge for both projects. But yeah, I can see us supporting that completely. Yeah. Okay, no other questions. Thank you very much.